I'm Tom Donahue, President and CEO of the Chamber, and I want to thank you very much for joining us for this important event. We're pleased to welcome to the Chamber today Ryan Lance, the Chairman and the CEO of ConocoPhillips, the world's largest independent oil and gas exploration company. Few people know the energy industry better than Ryan. He fell in love with it while he was in college, while working on oil rigs in Montana. While he understands the industry inside and out, he also understands the important role public policy plays in the success of his company and his industry and his country. He's been a strong industry leader, emphasizing an unrelenting commitment to safety and the benefits of secure energy future for the United States. I know Ryan is going to talk about how energy has been the backbone of Americans' economy over the past few years. In fact, the energy industry has been creating jobs and leading us out of this recession. But we have the opportunity to do even better and create even more jobs and revenue. We need the right policy framework here in Washington in order to do that. That's what the Chamber and our Energy Institute have been fighting for, both inside the Beltway and around the nation. I know that's what you'll be hearing more about, and some of the opportunities that Ryan and his colleagues have been pressing to help us expand the industry. We're thankful to have ConocoPhillips as a member of the Chamber and as a member of our board of directors, and their very important contributions to the public debate on this subject. We look forward to what Ryan has to say, and we will look at it in the context of three additional issues. How does energy affect the geopolitical relationships that we're all watching right now? Second, how can energy, effectively used, drive the revenues and the employment that will enable this country to deal with its only predictable crisis, and that is the cost of entitlements 10 years from now? And finally, how can we, as a nation and as industries, bring together a sound set of arguments that convinces the American people that the use of hydrocarbons is an opportunity to drive our economy, to help us save the entitlements, and let us have a significant role in affecting the geopolitical issues that are right now on our lap. You're going to hear a little while from now from a man that has a significant position in affecting all three of those points. So please relax, enjoy your lunch, and our program will begin as soon as we can give the speaker a few minutes to get a bite. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day.
Good afternoon again, ladies and gentlemen. Again, welcome to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I'm Jock McKernan. I'm Senior Advisor at both the Chamber and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. And the Foundation is pleased to partner with our colleagues at the 21st Century Energy Institute to host today's luncheon, another in our CEO Leadership Series. And I want to just put in a plug for the head of our institute, Karen Harbert, who will be leading the question and answer session after the speech is concluded. And you will see on your tables cards that you can fill out questions that will be reviewed, and we'll get as many of them in as we can. And there'll be people who come around and pick those cards up. So please feel free to start thinking about the kind of questions you might want to have asked, and they'll be collected during the program. You know, our two organizations, the Institute and the Foundation, have a great history of working together to bring you some of the leading voices in business today on the issues that they face, and today is no example. In fact, our speaker will tell you that as much as ConocoPhillips is about leading the way in energy, they are also very much about the power that makes the future of this country so promising. Because without that power and without that innovation, the growth, competitiveness, and connectivity that this country needs will not be possible. I want to put in a plug for our foundation. The reason that we're so pleased to be the co-hosts of today's session is because the purpose of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation is to strengthen long-term American competitiveness and to educate the public on how the free enterprise system improves both society and the economy. Put another way, the Foundation believes that the solutions to virtually any policy challenge or policy opportunity that are taking place in today's debate can be, and we would argue should be, resolved by a couple of fundamental questions. The first one is, will it advance America's competitiveness or will it thwart it? And the second is, will it drive jobs, growth, and opportunity in our free enterprise economy, or will it hold them back? Two questions that we think are crucial that should drive our debate here, especially in Washington. And the Foundation generally seeks to answer those questions in several important ways. We convene thought leaders and industry experts, and we partner with key stakeholders to foster dialogue, as we're doing today with our speaker. We identify emerging issues, and we start thinking about their implications and the possible solutions in advance. We work to inform and inspire the public to help them understand the positive role that business plays in society. And we seek to try to bring clarity and pragmatism to issues that are often confusing and complicated. Now, we work in coordination with the Foundation as well as our several dedicated centers. And these centers are working toward our shared purpose, but each on a focus of a given set of issues or problems, whether it is corporate citizenship, whether it's education and workforce, whether it's helping veterans and military spouses find the jobs that they deserve, whether it's preparing the next generation of state and local chamber executives, or whether it's facilitating networking and mentoring opportunities for women in business. So the Foundation and its centers are helping to lead the policy debate with innovative solutions and making policy recommendations that will truly advance America's long-term competitiveness. So today, the Foundation's mission will be on display in the remarks of our speaker. So it is my pleasure to introduce you to him now. Ryan Lance, as Tom Donahue said earlier, is the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of ConocoPhillips. He's held that position since the middle of 2012. He also serves as chair of the company's executive committee. He's a petroleum engineer for nearly, literally 30 years of oil and gas industry experience in senior management and technical positions with ConocoPhillips, with their predecessor, Phillips Petroleum, and with ARCO. His past executive assignments with ConocoPhillips have included responsibility for international exploration and production, and regional responsibility at various times for Asia, for Africa, for the Middle East, as well as for North America. He's an advocate for charities benefiting youth through his service on the board of Spindletop International. Ryan also serves on the board of directors for the Montana Tech Foundation and on the advisory council of the University of Texas Energy Institute. It won't surprise you to hear he's a member of the Society of Petroleum Engineers. He earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Petroleum Engineering from Montana Tech in Butte in 1984. So we're pleased to have him here. He's has a lot of really important things to talk about. I'm looking forward to the question and answer as well because, as Tom said, energy is so crucial right now to America's future. So please join me in welcoming our speaker, the Chairman and CEO of ConocoPhillips, Brian Lance.
Well, thank you, Governor McKernan. It's a real pleasure to be here, and thank you for what the foundation is doing for both American business and for our country as well. It's great what the Chamber is doing, what the foundation. So Tom set the bar pretty high. I was with him last week for a meeting, and we had the Emir of Qatar was here in town, and there was a delegation, and he said, when he announced him, he said he'd listened to the best speech in Chamber history last week. And I thought, crap, I'm going to be there next week. What does this mean? So I said, well, tell me more about this, Tom. And he goes, well, the Minister of Finance got up and gave a 2-minute speech and promised $35 billion of investment in North American infrastructure in the United States. So I aspire to be the second best speech in Chamber history because I'll have a little bit more than 2 minutes and I don't have $35 billion to spend, but I think we can make $35 billion on some of the comments here today. So really, thank you again. It's an honor to be here. And certainly, thank you to the Chamber. We need your voice here in Washington. Why? Because there are 3 million American businesses that support 120 million jobs in the United States. So policy decisions on business matter to a great many people. They can make the difference between fulfilling our economic potential or falling short. So my topic today, American energy, keeping the momentum going, is a good example. We have quite a success story, I think, to tell, but we need right policy decisions for the future, and I'll get to that in a minute. But first, I want to express my support and our support for the Chamber's views on some very key issues. Now, we agree that U.S. energy policy should pursue 3 imperatives. 1 is adequate, stable, and affordable supplies. 2, national energy security. And 3, environmental protection. Now, to achieve these imperatives, we both support expanded access to resources. Now, the administration just announced a 5-year plan to open up parts of the Atlantic to exploration. And that's certainly a step forward, and we appreciate that. And we hope to see similar steps like that in the future. Now, next, we also agree that infrastructure permitting is needlessly roadblocked. The example that we all know about, Keystone XL, was first proposed in 2008. It's been debated exhaustively, too long. It makes sense. It's the right thing to do. We just need to get on with it. But really, the permitting needs to be streamlined as well as depoliticized a bit. And that brings me to regulation. And we agree as an industry that regulation is needed. But it should be smart, it should be transparent, non-redundant, and balanced. It should be based on science, not hype. The benefits should exceed the costs to the consumers and the industry. And recently we saw an example of this in the DC Court of Appeals. It threw out an SEC rulemaking on transparency. And it did so in part because the rule didn't consider the burden that it would have on competition and the cost to investors. Another example, the Endangered Species Act current rules are really examples of regulations that need a rethink. They don't weigh costs against benefits. They're not always based on science. They too often reflect a response to certain pressure groups. They certainly want to stop oil and gas development completely. And it's unfortunate these regulations are manipulated really beyond their original intent. And there's also now talk about regulating methane. The industry is already making voluntary reductions. It's more efficient and it's less expensive than regulations would be, and there are also fewer delays in the efforts that we're putting forward. And besides, we've got a pretty strong economic incentive to reduce those emissions. The next area of agreement with the Chamber is the need for a corporate tax reform. We believe that the reform would promote greater business investment, and it could enhance the international competitiveness of American companies. But there certainly are some concerns. Reform should not enact double taxation of foreign earnings. It should not curtail cost and capital recovery, capital investments needed in our business and in business across the U.S. New tax rules should be stable and non-discriminatory. They should treat all industries fairly, be blind to industries. Don't single out a certain industry or companies for punitive treatment. We live in a competitive world today, and if we're to prosper, the U.S. needs to get it right on taxes. Free trade is another area we have in common with the Chamber. We favor open markets and promotion of exports. And last, I'll offer a few suggestions that we have on our own as well. We need to work in close collaboration with government. We've got several examples in our company where this has been successful. The EPA was recently gathering data on fracturing. We provided information, they expressed appreciation and sought clarification. The U.S. Bureau of Land Management was drafting rules on well integrity, and we met with them. We provided a lot of expertise as industry, and we provided them feedback. Others examples include the Interior's Fish and Wildlife Service. They're studying the sand dune lizard in the Permian Basin. In support, industry committed 90,000 acres of the Permian Basin area to a cooperative agreement on conservation. So collaboration can work, and we think we've demonstrated that. But now back to the American energy revolution and keeping the momentum going. We really do have an energy renaissance that's underway today. Both oil and gas production are rising, and it's greatly improved the energy security globally and here in the U.S. We've shifted the oil market's center of gravity away from unstable areas. Even the President referred to this in his State of the Union address. He said, today, America is #1 in oil and gas. And we did this through technology. Yes, oil is a high-tech business. We use some of the most powerful computers in the world today. We recruit PhDs from the finest universities. We recover oil and gas from something as hard as this podium. We drill in 8,000 feet of water, and we drill to 5 miles below the Earth's surface. So we're technology leaders. And we do this all the time, prioritizing safety in our business and environmental protection. But we're also about solutions and problem solving. Our success has really helped jumpstart the economy. We now support 9.8 million jobs in the U.S. We contribute 8% of the U.S. domestic gross product. And over the last 2 years alone, 40% of the U.S. GDP growth came from oil and gas. Many domestic manufacturers are thriving thanks to affordable energy. It's helping chemicals, it's helping metals, transportation, mining, paper, and others. Entire regions are benefiting across the U.S. It includes some outside of the traditional producing areas in the U.S. Consumers are saving at the utility meter and at the gas pump. And government is gaining new revenue through taxes and royalty. We've created hundreds of thousands of high-paying U.S. jobs. The oil industry's mean annual wage is twice that of the private sector. And our employee benefits are 50% greater than the average of the Fortune 500. Now, obviously, we're facing some pretty low prices right now, but it hasn't stopped the renaissance. Production is still growing. The resource base is so large and so diverse that this renaissance is going to continue. There are some impacts. Capital investments are falling, being reduced, responding to the lower oil prices, and there will be some job losses. But the oil and gas production is really fundamental to the U.S. economy. In fact, some of these very low oil prices are having, some believe that it has a net negative impact to the economy. That's despite savings at the pump. So this U.S. investment climate must remain positive elsewhere. We shouldn't put domestic producers at a competitive disadvantage by limiting the available markets. And natural gas is an example of this first and foremost. And it's an example of the right approach that we're taking. We have a growing surplus here in North America. By 2016, just next year, the U.S. will be positioned to become an exporter of liquefied natural gas. Several LNG export projects have already been approved by the government. And in return, the country is going to gain job creation and economic stimulation. Exports are vital to the U.S. We're the world's second leading product exporter. Product and services together generate $2.3 trillion from exports in 2013. That's 1/7 of our GDP. Now we have the opportunity to export another commodity, crude oil, and we can do this. The U.S. production bottomed at about 7 million barrels a day in 2009, just 5 years ago. Now we're back to above 11 million barrels a day of production. The DOE predicts that could grow to 12 million barrels a day by 2020 and by 18 million barrels a day by 2040. You look to our neighbor to the north in Canada, their production is growing. 4 million barrels a day could increase by 50% by 2030. Meanwhile, demand in the U.S. is relatively flat, and that's thanks to renewable fuel standards and really more efficient cars and trucks on the road today. So U.S. and Canada combined could soon exceed the total demand in North America. Together, we become net exporters by 2020. Now, low oil prices could delay that a little bit, but it's coming. It will be here. And most of our new production is from shale rock, and it's condensate and light oil, very, very light oil. And it doesn't match up well with our refineries that we've built on the Gulf Coast. Those refineries were specifically configured years ago to handle heavy crude from Venezuela and Mexico. Now, in order for them to process this light oil coming from this energy revolution, the refineries have to operate inefficiently, or they have to run at reduced rates. That costs more, so the Gulf Coast refiners have to pay less for that light oil. So today, the discounted U.S. price for crude is $5 to $10 below the global price of crude, $50 versus $60. And that discount starts to hurt the domestic producers. And it cuts our ability to reinvest back into the business to grow the production. And some ask, well, let's just expand the refineries. That is an option. It would take some pretty major investments, about $400 million per plant. Now, these refineries are already making pretty big investments to meet the tougher gasoline specification standards. And we think that air permits are awfully very difficult to get across where these refineries exist. So we just don't think they're going to make the expansions and the investments needed to handle all the light sweet crude that's coming. And that crunch time is coming pretty fast. Light oil per day, the light oil production today already exceeds our capacity to refine it. And you see that happening today. So U.S. crude price is trading $10 below the global oil price. And that's because the refineries are in seasonal turnaround. They're getting prepared to make the summer blend of gasoline that's different from the winter blend. So there's a seasonal impact today, and we're selling our U.S. crude for $10 less than what global crude is trading for. This surplus that's coming and this more crude that's coming is going to create a problem where just seasonal periods of time like we experience today will become annual problems by 2017. And that's why we need to talk about this critical policy issue today. And we're confident these higher volumes are coming. Oil production last year grew by 1 million barrels a day, or as much as 1.5 million a day when you include the liquids that come with the gas. And even with the lower investment, we're seeing predictions that we will grow by 700,000 barrels a day in 2015. But some of these new light oil projects start becoming uneconomic at prices below $70 a barrel. And the vast majority of them become uneconomic at $40 a barrel. So this U.S. light oil discount poses a real danger to the U.S. growth path. So again, today's global world prices are 60, the U.S. price is 50, and we've even seen it lower than that recently, and expect it probably to go lower over the next few months. Few projects will break even in this environment. Cash available for reinvestment will fall, and from a competitive standpoint, U.S. producers will be disadvantaged against our foreign competition. Bottom line, more drilling rigs will be laid down, more jobs will be lost, and the U.S. economic stimulation will fall. But there is a solution. There's a solution with several parts. First, heavy oil production is falling in both Mexico and Venezuela. The Canadian oil sands can replace it. That is, if the Gulf Coast refiners can get that crude economically. So approving Keystone would help. Certainly the president's veto last week was disappointing. So oil now moves by rail, and that's much more expensive than what it would do if it was moving by pipeline. Second, we need to export our surplus oil. We need exports, particularly in a low-price environment. World prices are already close to a break-even for many of the projects, and then that U.S. discount pushes some of them even below that level. So investment levels are down today. But there's a roadblock to exports. We all know the 75, the Energy Policy and Conservation Act banned them. There are a few exceptions. Small amounts of oil going to Canada, exports from Alaska, but the ban is out of date. It worsens the impact in a price downturn, and it reduces the U.S. role in global markets. You know, we should treat crude oil like any other potential product export. And by the way, we're the third largest U.S. export by dollar volume is oil products, and that's gasoline and diesel fuel. So they can be exported legally, but the crude from which they're made cannot be. Now, we've seen one positive step. The administration has recently decided that some processed condensate, a specific type of liquid that we produce, is a product and can be exported. But it doesn't provide the magnitude of the relief that this industry will need by 2017. Now, I think there's pretty major benefits to crude oil exports. On the world market, light oil sells for more than heavy oil. So the U.S. would gain by exporting our light oil and by importing the less expensive heavy oil that our refineries are built and tooled up to handle. The Brookings Institute projects that U.S. production could rise by up to 3 million barrels a day. Jobs would be created, economic growth would be generated, and household income would grow. IHS says the industry's capital investments would rise by $750 billion by 2030, and that's certainly a lot of economic stimulus. Our annual GDP would gain $135 billion at its peak. We would add 1 million more jobs at its peak. The trade balance would improve by $67 billion annually. And through 2030, government would gain $1.3 trillion in additional tax and royalty revenue. At the pump, consumers would gain lower fuel prices. And that's because world oil prices, as world oil prices come down when supplies are added. So more supplies into the world oil market brings the price down. And fuel prices follow world oil prices. The IHS estimates that gasoline savings could be as much as $18 billion annually. And again, Brookings says that could be 9 to 12 cents per gallon at the pump. And of course, there's a vast number of geopolitical benefits. Our rising U.S. production today has already backed out 3 million barrels a day of imports just over the last 3 years. And that's equal to the production losses the world has seen from North Africa and from the Middle East. So all things being equal, if we hadn't had the extra production from North America, world prices would have been $10 to $40 higher post-recession, at a time when we didn't need that. So thank goodness for the American Revolution and the production coming out of the U.S., because it offset some of the production that was lost around the world today. And future exports also start to play a stabilizing role. OPEC's not going to play that. Now it resides with the U.S. shale oil industry. It would strengthen our economic power that underlies our U.S. global influence. We could provide reliable sources of energy to many of our friendly countries now that are dependent on less secure sources. And keep in mind, we're only going to export the surplus. So I tell my refining friends, don't worry. There's going to be plenty of light oil to refine in your refineries. And you still have a competitive advantage. Foreign refiners are going to have to pay $2 to $6 a barrel more to transport our crude to their refineries. So again, we're just talking about exporting the surplus that our current refining system can't handle. So it's time for the government to address this issue. Now, it could do so through executive action or certainly through legislation. So in closing, I look for the opportunity to take your questions and answers with Karen. Certainly, we know we've got a big job ahead of us to convince and educate and advocate on behalf of this and convince policymakers and the public that really is the right policy to allow for oil exports. We have to change the mindset. There's no longer a scarcity of reserves, but abundance of reserves, certainly in the U.S. and in North America. It's really the export ban's a holdover from the last century. The energy renaissance today is real, and it's long-lasting, and it's here for a long time to come. And it can continue to drive and be a driver of that economic growth engine here in the U.S. and help us grow. And it's that growth, really, that Tom Donahue mentioned earlier. How do we solve the entitlements? We're not going to spend our way to success. We're not going to cut our way to success. We're going to grow our way to success. And this industry is one of those vehicles of growth. And so we can help that by ensuring that we recognize the new realities and really allowing oil exports. Thank you.
Well, while Ryan gets mic'd up, for those of you that are not familiar with the CEO Leadership Series, we only hold about a handful of these a year. And we pick those industries that are the underpinning of our economy, enhance our competitiveness, advance our geopolitical interests, and clearly energy fits all of those boxes extremely well. But more importantly, we pick the CEOs that have the vision, that have that firm grasp of reality, and that conviction to move the needle. And that is why we're so pleased that we've been working a long time to get Ryan here with his busy schedule, to get him here to have an opportunity to explore these issues with you in a little bit more detail. I'm going to start where you left off.
Okay.
And please, everyone in the audience, you don't want to hear me speak. I want to ask your questions. So don't forget to give these to staff that are running around, and we'll get them up here and get them asked to Ryan. Geopolitics and the economy. Let's talk about that intersection. We just weathered a terrible recession at a time when your industry was experiencing tremendous growth. And now we look forward into a time of geopolitical tremendous challenge with what's happening in the Middle East and what's happening in Iraq and Iran. So look back, what would have happened if this renaissance hadn't happened to our economy? And looking forward, what would be happening geopolitically right now and to our price environment if it hadn't happened?
Yeah, I tried. I think good question. Thank you, Karen. I think again, pleasure to be here. But I tried to address it a little bit. When you look back, what went off the market in our business over the last 3 years as a result of Iranian sanctions, issues that went on in Libya, in Syria, the difficulties Iraq had ramping up their production. Coming out of the recession, we lost about 3 million barrels a day of global oil production. And IHS estimates, the government estimates, that would have added, if nothing else would have happened, probably would have added $10 to $40 a barrel higher oil cost at a time when the U.S. economy was struggling to come out of the recession. The global economy certainly was struggling to come out of the recession. But what happened over that period of time is U.S. production, the technology kicked in. We had an opportunity. We unlocked some of the potential on the shale oil, and the U.S. alone production grew by 3 million barrels a day. So coming out of the recession, we had relatively stable oil prices for a period of 3 years, with a lot of economic growth coming out of our industry, a lot of an activity in states that are pretty diverse around the United States, whether it was the Pennsylvania Marcellus, whether it was the Bakken in North Dakota, the Eagle Ford Shale in Texas, or the Permian Basin. So now or the Utica in Ohio. So a lot of the activity was coming on that really caused some of that dramatic impact. And as I said, our industry really did drive some pretty significant benefits to GDP. At the same time, while the natural gas revolution was occurring, the gas that's coming with this, we're lowering our CO2 footprint. We're back down to 92 levels of CO2 emissions going into the atmosphere as a direct result of the natural gas production that occurred over the last 3 years. So it's been this juxtaposition. You said the geopolitical events, energy issues, and the environment, where our industry plays right in the center of all those issues.
You know, what's neat about these events is the audience that we get. And I just looked around the room while you were talking, and I noticed Chairman Brady is here. So we have some current members of Congress, former members, and a cross-section from the diplomatic community, and trade associations and business leaders. So thank you all for being here. It's a testament to how important energy is. I want to go to a place that you used to live, Alaska. Okay. Very, very central to America's energy past and future. And there are some that would say that some of the energy renaissance around the country has happened in spite of policy. not because of policy. And Alaska is in an interesting position. You're heavily invested there. There's huge opportunities there, and yet we have this big piece of infrastructure called the Trans-Alaska Pipeline that is in danger of running dry by a couple 100,000 barrels, which is would be a huge detriment to our economy. So talk a little bit about what you're doing in Alaska, how easy it is to do business up there, and what you'd like to see actually happen up there.
Well, it's been a remarkable journey and story for Alaska since the discovery of Prudhoe Bay in 1968 and the opening of the TAPS pipeline in ⁸78 and the throughput that's gone there. But you're right now. The production off the big main fields is declining. The throughput through TAPS now is down around 500,000 barrels a day. At its peak, it was over 2 million barrels a day. But there still is latent opportunity. We're developing west into the Naval Petroleum Reserve, NPRA, on the western part of the North Slope. We've got some projects out there, but we run into constant opposition, certainly from the NGOs. Now, this is the Naval Petroleum Reserve. There were over 100 wells drilled in the Naval Petroleum Reserve back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. There's oil seeps at the surface, and we've been fortunate to find opportunities, but it is a bit of a grind to go through the permitting process. In Alaska, we're trying to do it on minimal footprint. We're trying to build on ice. So you can't tell, when the ice melts, you can't tell where we were at, but it's very remote infrastructure. So the logistics are tough and the timeline is tough. So you have to get certainty around permitting. You have to get certainty around the regulations. You got to understand the rules of the game before you commit a lot of investment to that. And that's what we're working with the state and the federal government, whether it's through the Department of Interior. And we've had our struggles. And I think the governor recognizes it. It's a significant threat to his ability to attract new investment into Alaska, to provide the certainty around the fiscal framework and understand what the rules of the game are. And that's what we have to strive for. Work cooperatively with our partners in federal government and state government, is to make sure we understand the rules, we keep the rules, and we get some certainty around what that's going to look like both fiscally and regulatorily. And we're struggling with that, quite frankly, right now. Alaska's struggling with that. And there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot more investment that could flow up there, but we need the right fiscal environment. We need the right regulatory environment.
You spent, a better part of the tail end of your speech about exports and making a very cogent case. And of course, there's the other side that has been trying to make its case as well. Tell me what you think that their real argument is, their real concern is, and what your answer to that is.
Well, as I tried to say, I think our refining friends, I tell them I think there's going to be plenty of, this light oil revolution is in the first inning of a 9-inning game. We're still developing technology that's going to continue to unlock more supply. OPEC's refusal to play the swing supplier in the world today, I think that job's coming back to North America. And we're going to be the swing supplier in terms of the global supply that goes in to satisfy demand. And there's going to be enough light oil that I tell our refining friends, don't worry, there's going to be enough to refine in your refineries. They like to see the discount. They like to see U.S. crude discounted relative to global crude. And that's because gasoline is sold on a global price. It's not sold on a U.S. price, it's sold on a global price. And to the extent they can discount the U.S. price of crude oil, then they've got a built-in margin. And but what I tell them is don't worry, you're still going to have a competitive advantage over the foreign refiners, because it costs $2 to $6 a barrel to transport the crude, but it needs to get into the open market. The refineries in the U.S. aren't built to handle this kind of crude. Those refineries exist internationally. They're in Europe, they're in Africa, they're in South America, and they're in Asia. So that's where we need to get the crude. If we get more supply into the global market, that's going to reduce and temper the volatility of the global market and temper the volatility of U.S. gasoline prices. So it makes eminent amount of sense. It's not a product that we want to landlock in the U.S. We've got to get it into the global market.
I thought it was interesting in your speech you mentioned, or you characterized Conoco and the industry as a whole as high tech. And you're always being pressed to do more high tech, and you're characterized as the fuel of yesterday all the time. I think it'd be interesting for the audience to hear about your commitment in Conoco to technology development, the opportunities that advanced technology has brought the industry in a very short amount of time. I think we think of it here, everybody thinks about high tech and they immediately think Silicon Valley. And I think we would argue that there's more high tech development going on in Houston and Denver than in San Mateo and Santa Clara County. So talk about high tech and advanced technology as critical to the to your business?
Yeah, I think we do get a bad rap. You see the pictures, you see the roughnecks on the rigs, and you see sort of the mechanical nature of this
Think
business.
of that roughneck.
Yeah.
Right? Fossil fuel, crude. We don't have the greatest vernacular in this industry, right?
Fracking has too many consonants, you know. At the end of the
communicators were not in the room when that was developed.
Yeah. No, it is. We tell people what we're doing as a company, it's not only about how do you get more from the rocks that you're trying to produce, how do you do it cheaper, more efficiently. I was telling Congressman Brady, I mean, we could have a rig here and we could drill, 5 miles down, number of miles over, and we could pop up at his desk. That's pretty high tech, right? We could figure out how to go do that. We're not going to do that, Congressman.
You'd have people pulling up in front of your office, I guarantee you.
But we are, what we're doing is truly remarkable in the deep water Gulf of Mexico and in the unconventional, the shale oil, extracting hydrocarbons out of rock that's as hard as this table. It's truly remarkable. It's done sustainably, it's done safely, and it's done with the environment in mind. Now, we have had some issues, and methane's certainly an issue that's creeped up, and there's some proposed regulations on new and existing sources. But what we've told the EPA and others is that we understand that. We don't want any fugitive emissions. We want to sell all the product. We're incentivized to keep it in the pipes, keep it in the vessels, and sell it into the market. So we are doing things to voluntarily reduce our emissions. We're understanding where they're coming from. Sustainability, Canadian oil sands. We're trying to get the carbon content of that oil down to equivalent to conventional oil. We're doing some high-tech operations to make the recovery of the Canadian oil sands less footprint, less water intensive, less CO2 intensive, and we've made incredible strides as an industry over the last 5 to 10 years. So it is a high-tech industry, it really is. When we get kids that come out of school and come into this business, and that's what's been great for our business over the last 5 years, this revolution, this energy renaissance has allowed kids that are educated here to stay here. Now, I would tell you 5 years ago, most of the cash off our North American business was going to fund international growth. So kids coming out of school had to know where Luanda, Angola was, where Jakarta, Indonesia was, where Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia was. Today, they're worried about, where is Dickinson, North Dakota? Where can I go in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Oklahoma, Texas, Montana? And so it's really been a great renaissance for our business over the last 5 years, because it's not a dying business. This is a business that will last for a very long time. It's high tech, and it's quite exciting, and it pays well, as I said.
Let's stick with that point about opportunities elsewhere versus here for a moment. And you're a multinational company. You're all over the world. You're in Europe. You're in Asia. You're in Africa, Australia. And as you look at great, the rocks are here, the resources here, and there's great opportunity. But how do we stack up against other opportunities? We have higher taxes. We have a regulatory framework that is growing in its burden on the industry. As you look around the world, how do we stack up against some of the other places where you're either currently operating or considering investing?
Well, I think despite some of the issues that we talk about, North America and the U.S. stacks up reasonably well, and it does because of the rule of law, transparency, and private land ownership. So we are able to actually effectively go after, develop, and do it in a reasonable fashion with efficiencies and speed that allow both that can convince the royalty owner or the landowner that can be done sustainably and really provide an economic incentive for the companies to invest a lot of cash. People don't understand our business. We make a lot of revenue. So, our company, $1 billion of revenue, but we reinvest 80% of that back into the business. 20% goes to our shareholder right off the top to pay our shareholder, but 80% gets reinvested into the business. It's a very capital-intensive business. And that's what's unique about it, unique about this business. And I think the U.S. does compete pretty favorably because of the rule of law, transparency. But this revolution, this shale revolution, it will occur internationally. It's going to go slower because they don't have the infrastructure that we've built in the United States over the last 100 years. It doesn't have the regulatory environment, despite the issues that we have with it. And it doesn't have the service industry and that infrastructure in place to really go after and attack the unconventional opportunities that are there globally. It will progress to the international world, and the technology that we're developing in the U.S. will help that. But we do have some issues with U.S. We have to streamline the permitting process. We have to get some stability and predictability into the system. So we know if we're going to make billions of dollars of investment, We understand when we're going to get a permit. We understand what the regulations are, what the mitigations that we have to go do, that we work collaboratively with the regulatory environment to create a win-win situation both for them. We're not out there to try to do something in a haphazard way. We're trying to do it in a very sustainable way. We get input from our communities that we're in, we get input from the state, and we get input from the federal regulators. And then we try to work with them cooperatively. That's the advantage that the U.S. has over some parts of the rest of the world, but it can be a double-edged sword.
Just to stay on that point, because you mentioned you're for regulation, but you want it to be fair and balanced regulation. And you mentioned the Endangered Species Act as an example of things that could potentially, threaten the viability of extraction of oil and gas. And it's whether it is the sage grouse or the prairie chicken, or there's a multitude of things. And I think everybody in America wants to protect, their land, their animals, their water for sure. How do we strike that balance at the moment? I mean, it seems to be tilting in one direction, which is to be more restrictive. What do we need to do to restore balance? Yeah,
I think it's really the open and objective conversations with Fish and Wildlife, Fish and Game, and the different communities. What are you trying to accomplish? Where is the problem, and how can we work together to solve that? And a great example for us in the industry was the Permian Basin with the sand dune lizard that I mentioned earlier. When we met down and talked with them, here's what they're trying to accomplish. How can you help us? And we set aside 90,000 acres of land, so we won't develop that. We'll do it in a much different way. We won't have a surface imprint. So industry can work around some of these issues as long as we understand the motivations, and we understand that the motivations are based on fact, science, and not hype and hysteria. Because we know a lot would like to just completely eliminate the opportunity for us to go extract the resources and add to the global economy. And that's what we get a lot of, is we get the extreme views. If we can meet in the middle somewhere, we can generally work out a solution that works for both of us.
Going back to the oil exports, there's a lot of questions on oil exports here, so I'm going to try and summarize a couple of them together. You said this is going to be an education process. We're not quite there yet, and so I wonder if you can think of what will get us there. But also, there are a number of countries, there are a number of European countries that have approached the United States that this is a geopolitical importance to them. There certainly are other, we would be displacing some other suppliers in the market. Does it matter that where this oil would go? I mean, it goes into the world oil market. We all know it will go wherever it's wanted, but is there a geopolitical play to be made here right now? How do we advance the time clock for something to happen?
Well, I think we're open to a number of ideas, and I've gotten some ideas from people in the room here today, and we're certainly, it feels like trying to push uphill a little bit to get some momentum behind it. I think everybody I talk to believes that it's good policy, and people are trying to figure out the politics of the situation a little bit, and how can they represent it back to their home constituency, because it is counterintuitive. Why would we be exporting at the same time we're importing? So that's the education part about it, to tell people that, the refineries we have in the U.S., while they're great pieces of equipment, they're not specifically designed to run this kind of crude oil, and that makes a difference. So I think that's part of the education process. We're trying to think of ways. Some say, well, start with swaps to Mexico, start with, and slowly incrementalize your way up there. And that can work as long as we have an endpoint in mind that's, by 2017, 2018, we're going to hit a bit of a wall. And we've got to get there by that point in time. We're starting now to try to educate and advocate on this behalf because we see that coming. And you can see that today. You see it in the last 2 months in our business today. You can see that our U.S. crude is being discounted dramatically relative to world crude prices because the refineries are in turnaround. They can't take the crude because they're in maintenance season. They're doing turnaround. And as our supply grows, that's going to become an annual problem, not just a seasonal problem. But we're all ears. We're trying to figure out how to take an advice from folks like Congressman Brady, who's been a great advocate on this issue. Others, Senator Murkowski is leading the band on the Senate side, and so I know she's going to have some hearings here shortly where we get a chance to talk about this issue and sit down with our refining friends next to us and talk about why we don't think this will be a problem. But it is something we got to gain some traction this year. Certainly as we go into an election year, it becomes harder. And I think the administration on policy even has suggested that they agree. I mean, some indication they're willing to allow condensate exports. We just have to take that next step. So I don't have the answer on how we accelerate it, Karen. I'm interested in others' kind of views, and we'd be happy to hear what other people are saying. The approach we're taking is trying to form a group of small independent producers like ourselves that are being impacted by this, and know that we can put more investment into this business if we can reduce that differential on crude.
Yeah, no, there's a number around town that certainly want to help you do that, so
Yeah.
we look forward to that. A slightly different question. You mentioned, Pennsylvania, Ohio, North Dakota, I mean, the states that are really leading the energy renaissance. So much of that production and the oil side, all of that increase in production has been on state and private lands. The natural gas side production on state and private lands is going up, and it's going down on federal lands. So interestingly, we always get to a point in energy policy, we need a national energy policy. We need a big new energy bill. Well, really the action is in the states right now. So how important is state energy policy right now to your success versus big federal policy?
Well, I think that's a great question. I think it's more important. I think getting the stability, the states know how to do it. And what we say, the issues in North Dakota are different than the issues in Ohio, different than the issues in Pennsylvania. The water issues are different, the emissions different, the footprint issues are different, the stakeholder engagement issues are different, and the states are really well placed to manage this issue. So the message to the federal government is, I know you need to ensure some minimum standards, and there's some of that may apply, but the states are really well equipped to manage this and have been managing this for quite some time. So I think you're spot on. Let's not get layers of management built into this system that slow it down, that make it more costly. That's the last thing we want to go do. But we need to ensure our federal regulators that the minimum standards that the states are applying to are reasonable, and we think they are. We haven't found any standards in the state yet that, whether it's regulating hydraulic fracturing or whether it's regulating water issues or emission issues, that don't really, when you show them to the federal regulator and you show what the state's doing, they say, oh yeah, well that's good. That's what we intend to happen. So you're right, this is happening on private land and within the states, and we think that's entirely appropriate the way it's being regulated.
And that means certainly that the governors, who actually have to balance their budgets every year, unlike the federal government, probably look to you as much more of a solution than at the federal government level. Last question, because I want to be considerate of everyone's time. You talked about North America as the new center of gravity of the oil market. If you think back even 10 years ago, anybody that was in the energy world would say OPEC is the supply and the US and others are the demand. Right? And now we're looking at a world where we're going to be the big new suppliers and demand is in other parts of the world. Talk about us being a center of gravity. What does that really mean? Does that disempower the previous suppliers? Is it empowering us? What does that mean, and what would we expect in terms of the oil market dominated by the West?
Well, I think it's a tremendous opportunity for the U.S., both geopolitically and really the economy here at home. If we can solve some of the problems and continue a sustainable path of development in the U.S., not only does it add revenue and taxes and royalty and revenue to state, local, and federal government, it does kind of change the geopolitical way that this market has been working. I mean, think of 10 years ago when the U.S. needed to protect the Straits of Hormuz to make sure that Middle Eastern oil was flowing and could flow unabated into North America. Today, we don't necessarily we're concerned about that, but there's other countries like China that have to be more concerned about that than we do because of the revolution that's been going on here. So the flows of energy now are moving in different directions, and they're radiating out of the U.S., and they're helping countries that need stable supplies. They're helping them with their energy imbalance. So we are starting to impact, because of what's happening here in North America, we're starting to impact those trade flows. We're starting to impact where crude is going, and it's going to change the geopolitical landscape. It's going to change the relationship that countries have to have with Middle Eastern producers, with Venezuelan producers, Mexican producers, African producers. Just the light oil revolution alone in the U.S. has backed out the imports from Nigeria and Angola into the U.S. So because we're producing this light crude and our refineries can use our own crude here at home, we don't have to import crude from some of these other countries. And that's changing, so those other countries now have to figure out what relationships do they have globally, and I think it's adding to some of the In some cases, adding to the stability, and certainly in other cases, creating a bit more instability. But we're at the center of that. We're at the center of what's happening, and we've got a tremendous opportunity to understand what that means geopolitically and what that means to our friends in terms of stable sources of supply.
Characterizing the United States as the new swing producer is quite a change of vernacular from just a few short years ago.
Yeah, that's remarkable. I mean, just look at the OPEC's decision not to rein in supply to try to impact the supply-demand imbalance. And again, that supply-demand imbalance is about 1.5 million barrels a day. It's less than 5% of OPEC's production. So their decision, it's a pretty dramatic decision to preserve market share and not curtail production by 1.5 million barrels a day. And now the U.S. is becoming the swing. Prices are down, we'll reduce our investments, supply will be impacted, but as prices come back, supply can come back relatively quickly as well. So again, that goes back to the center of gravity here in North America as a result of what's happening with this energy renaissance that our country is going through.
Well, I'm sure the audience can appreciate why we chose Ryan and Conoco to feature this year and the important leadership that he will be providing on some of the critical decisions that we have to make in the course of the coming months over crude exports, access, endangered species, and that balance that we're all seeking in the policy discussion. So please join me in thanking Ryan Lance.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great job.